is Industry 4, and then we will see one or two real examples where this is, Industry 4 is happening, and then we will also see what the future holds for us that. Right. So with this, we will, see what Industry 4 is, and we'll try to understand what its origin is. Right. So as we all knows, because this, session is happening from past 2 days, I hope everybody has got a fair bit idea about what Industry 4 is. Right. So that way, it's basically, industrial paradigm shift as far as the manufacturing industry is concerned, where we try to make them smart in a way that, so the manufacturing industry is basically driven by three predominant forces, that is connectivity, intelligence, and flexible automation. So these things will help us to refine the process of manufacturing and make it much more, useful to everyone. So the Industry 4, the term is basically a German term, so called as Industry 4. So it was, got into existence because, the people involved in manufacturing industry so wanted to have the IoT and the cyber physical systems in their manufacturing unit, with a prime focus being on the productivity and the people who are involved in the organization, and they wanted to have the better impact on the environment and keeping everything as a secured one. So that way, their little strategy has grown into a huge factor in today's world, and it has been called as a fourth industrial revolution, right? So with this little, talk about the Industry 4, we will try to understand the different principles that this Industry 4 employs, right? So the Industry 4 relies on basically on six principles, the first one being the interoperability. So what we mean by this, right? So it basically involves, so exchange of the information between, right, the machines, the humans, and then the entire organization where, right, so the data is exchanged so that we try to coordinate the entire process in a very, very better way. And then comes the virtualization. Now, what is virtualization, right? See, virtualization is basically imitating the physical resource into a virtual resource. So what happens then is, so when I'm able to extract the virtual, resource from a physical resource, we will try to gauge what is happening in the actual process. We will try to identify the test solutions. We will try to identify what are the possible, pitfalls we can encounter when the actual machinery is working. So thereby we will be able to gain the better understanding early in the design cycle, so that we can always come up with a better solution, so that the process can be taken in a very better way or in an efficient way. Then comes the decentralization. So what does the decentralization means? It's basically, so creating the logical partition among the entire industrial process, breaking down into smaller chunks where we will, give the individual task to various people involved locally or office bearers, so that, the decision making will be done at in a quick time, right? Instead of waiting for the approval from a set of people sitting in one entity. So we will break it into smaller units, so that as and when a decision making is involved, that can be done at a quicker time. And then comes something called as the real time capability, right? The one of the prime factor of Industry 4 is the real time capability, where we want the data to be measured and analyzed in real time, so that the decision can be done in a quicker time, right? So and also we can avoid any possible errors that creep in the future time. Then there comes the service orientation. The whole idea of service integration is basically giving the prime importance to the customers now. It involves the interaction between businesses and the internal people that are managing various resources, so that the customer needs can always be met. So keeping their priorities in mind. Then comes the modularity, right? So what is modularity? Again, it is, breaking your entire setup into a smaller units, so that the people associated with the smaller units can be given the liberty to, look or focus on a particular activity, so that the process will be carried out in a much faster rate, right? So with these design principles, let us try to understand what lies in Industry 4 as far as the underlying technologies is concerned, right? So meanwhile, in case if you have any questions, please do. You can always post me, right? You can always interrupt. You can always start, so that will be glad to interact with everyone and then try to get your brain, so that I will also end up learning something out of this, right? Okay, right. So then, what are the technologies that gets with the industry for, right? So we already have a fair bit idea about the different technologies that are available. So in specific to industry, what we have is something called as the industrial Internet of Things, then the big data, then we have the cloud computing, something called as the additive manufacturing, which is nothing but a 3D printing. Then we have advanced robotics, and then augmented and virtual realities, right? So these are the prime technologies that get associated with the industry 4. Now let us try to understand each one of them with respect to the industry 4, right? So what we have first is something known as the industrial Internet of Things, right? So it is basically connecting the industry to internet. In that case, it is called as also called industrial internet or industrial Internet of Things. So what we do in this particular segment is we expect the machine to communicate or basically send the data, so that we analyze this data and come to a conclusion where the business insight will be considered, and then accordingly some decision making process will happen, right? So the driving force of this technology is basically to make the machine to share the information in real time, so that the analysis can be done to improve the business now, right? So one example where industrial Internet of Things is practically employed is in a healthcare company called BJC Healthcare, which basically manages around 15 hospitals in USA, right? So they have employed this industrial IoT to manage their inventory and supply chain management, right? So I think maybe when we look at the hospital's perspective, we all know that when we go to a hospital, there are so many things to look at as far as the medical equipment, and then the any sort of operation related, the be it the consumables, be it the machines, be it the the pharmaceutical equipments and all those things, right? So there is a huge chunk of stocks available. So it is very difficult to keep track of all these things manually. So maybe if I have to just go and check what are the kind of equipments that are available and what is their expiry date is, so that would take a lot of efforts from the human beings. Now, this what BJC Healthcare has done is it has included this radio frequency identification tags to each of the stocks that are put up in the inventory, and they use scanning technologies to send this information, and every information is basically stored in a centralized processor, so that all the people who are concerned can look into this data, and they can decide what is that they want to procure and what is that they want to clear from the stock. And by the admission of BJC Healthcare, it has been seen that, so the BJC Healthcare is able to save up to 23% of the stocks. So unwanted stock is being, basically removed from the inventory. So because we all know, so all these medical equipments have a life of time of a certain duration. So it is very important that once the particular expiry date is done, so we don't want to have those equipments. In that case, you can always get rid of that. So by this, technique, the hospital was able to save around 23% of their stocks, right? So they are able to clear all unwanted stocks. And also, it's not only about, keeping the stock to a limited inventory. So they are able to save a $5 million every single year, and they expect that this number to go further as the technology refines, right? So in that case, what IoT does in case of industry is it basically improves the operations, and then it also increases efficiency, and of course the cost will be reduced by having these efficient technologies in place, right? So that is one use case of the industry IoT when it comes to the healthcare sector. Okay. Right. So this is one technology related to industry 4. Then what we have is something called as the big data and the analytics, right? This is one more very important technology that plays a very massive role as far as the industry 4 is concerned, right? So as far as big data is concerned, it refers that the large and complex data that is being generated by IoTs. As I told, IoT is basically connected to various industries. In that case, a huge amount of data is sent every single second. So in that case, so managing this will really become a very, very tough task. That is where the big data and the analytics will get into picture, right? So the again, the data will come from various sources, right? It can be your sensors, it can be cameras, it can be website, it can be computers, any enterprise application that are connected to the cloud. So every single second, a massive amount of data will be generated. So then it is very, very important that we consider this data and use the analytics. So typically it is done using the machine learning models and then the data visualization algorithms. So that will provide a business insight. So that would really help us to, simplify the process or basically take a business decision that would dramatically increase the possibility of, increasing the productivity cycle. Right. So in that case, there are various algorithm and there are various, big data techniques are available to look after this particular thing. So one again important application where big data is basically being used in a automotive factory of robot Bosch that is located in China. So what the Bosch has done is, so in its core plant process, they have connected all these machines to sensors so that they always keep on looking into these machineries. They try to identify the, how the machines are working. Basically, they try to check what is the health of the machinery is. Then they try to understand whether the machine is able to sustain for a longer duration of time, or it basically requires some kind of right handling or some kind of servicing is required, right? So big data is basically involved in this. Every single second these machineries will send a lot of data that would be stored, that would be analyzed, and then based upon this the people will make a decision. It will send out a instruction to all the workers that are working in that particular plant. So it alerts them so that any bottleneck that creeps in the production at some point in the future will be addressed well in time, so that the machinery keeps running all the time without encountering any problems as such, right? So taking this a little approach will always help us to predict the equipment failures in advance. It will also enable the factory to schedule its maintenance right in a periodic way, so that unless until something gets happened, so instead of waiting for that time to service, we will take this well in advance, and then we will try to schedule the maintenance. So that is what is actually being done in a automotive factory of Bosch, right? This is employed in real time, right? So this is something a big data application with respect to the manufacturing process of Bosch, right? So then, so what we have in the third list is something called as, okay, again, so as I told, the big data offers a lot of advantages, right? So uh, it basically, as far as the machinery is concerned, you can use this intelligent information to make the business related decisions. So then the third one is the cloud computing, right? So in all ways, our life, we are always seeing some kind of cloud computing into picture. So the simple mail that we send using the Google Mail, or the storage that we use from the Google, is basically one of the cloud computing applications where we store our information, be it in the text file, be it in the image file, be it in the audio video file. We can use these clouds and we can store the data into that. So what this will typically do is, see, the advantage of storing all this data in a cloud is that you can basically avoid the expensive computing infrastructure. You don't need to have them in your premises. You can just store the data in the cloud, so which are offered by Amazon, Google, Microsoft, IBM. There are so many companies that will offer the cloud computing services, right? So that is at a very small level. Now when it comes to the industries, right, so when we have so much of the manufacturing processor, or be it any process that is connected through various protocols, and then that keeps on sending the data through the IoTs, it becomes very, very essential that we have a proper infrastructure where these data are securely stored, right? So in case if you are creating a local storing structure, it is very, very expensive in a way that you need to set up the structure, then you need to have the resources to look after this. In that case, it will add a lot of cost to the manufacturing industries. Instead of that, what we do is we will buy the cloud from the service providers. So based upon the level of storage we need, only we can utilize that, and the cost is also going to be saved in this case, because as per the need, right, we will buy the storage. And maybe if my storage is limited, I end up paying only to that particular storage, right? So that way the cloud computing enables organization to use the computer resources without having to develop a computing infrastructure on their own premise. And then the term cloud computing refers to the storage of the information in the remote servers, and that can be accessed using the internet now. So it enables the implementation of various solutions that once required heavy computing power, right? So whether these services from Google, IBM, Microsoft, and Amazon, we are able to manage our data in a much better way, and also, so we will be able to have the data securely placed in these clouds, right? So one a company that has come forward, where it is basically an automotive company, where it is creating something called as an automotive cloud, right? Recently Volkswagen has tied up with Microsoft, and together they are building this cloud called Volkswagen Automotive Cloud, where the Volkswagen tries to connect the every single home of the person who is driving the car through it connectivity services, and it offers something known as the personal assistant. So it will also provide the periodic messages to the user, indicating that when the service of the car is due. And since these days, so every four-wheeler comes with the heavily loaded navigation tools, and then the softwares, and then media streaming applications. So these applications will always be periodically updated with the help of their cloud services, right? So now, as in more and more companies are trying to get into autonomous driving, or for that matter getting into the electrical sectors, where the now these days the EV vehicles are in vogue now. So every company wants to have a pie of that, right? So in that case, whenever you want to have this kind of autonomous cars, so think of the data that we need to manage, right? So because with the driver, it is little with the driver itself, it is very difficult to drive the cars in jam-packed roads. Now think of a scenario where the autonomous cars will be able to make these decisions. So they come loaded with a lot of sensors, and lot of embedded system devices, which will continuously generating loads of data. And to refine this process of automaking, the manufacturers has to continuously gather this information, and then you need to look for what are the possible pitfalls that are happening with the kind of setup that I have created, and based upon that they will be able to make a right decision, so that this autonomous driving facility at times becomes a reality. So everybody's is that somebody asking something? Sure, if I'm sure somebody is talking in
I'll
the
yes, I'll just mute, sir.
24 batch,
okay.
24 batch.
Uh, now it's okay.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am.
Thank-
Right. So I was just mentioning that Volkswagen has come up with this automotive cloud, right? So this is one application where, so the industry 4 can basically make use of these cloud services, right? As more and more automakers try to, get their hands into the autonomous car segments and electric vehicles, they need something where, so they can reliably store their data and process it, so that they can make intelligent business decisions. So that is where this cloud services will be very handy to them, right? So in that case, the various benefits that come with cloud computing is, so there is a survey from the International Data Corporation, which says that so more and more companies are ready to pump in lots of money into cloud computing. As of now, in to early 2020s, it has already reached $9.2 billion industry now. And the key factor behind this adoption is the benefit of being able to centralize operations so that the information can be shared across an entire organization. As I told, so once you keep the data in the cloud, anyone who is, a part of the business will be able to access this data, and they can always make the right decision as far as the business acumen is concerned. Right. And also IDC says that the three driving industries that are basically shifting to more and more cloud spaces, the quality control, computer aided engineering, and manufacturing execution systems. So they are the three prominent technologies that are, running behind the cloud computing technologies. Right. So clearly cloud computing is transforming virtually every facet of manufacturing, right from workflow management to the production operation, production operations. Right. So now up next, what we have is something called as advanced robotics, right? So when we say robotics, the robotics has been there in the industry from a very, very, very long time. So it is now with Industry 4 that as if the robotics has got a new lease of life. So these days the robotics are built to perform very, very complex and delicate tasks. And some of the industries, in fact, the robotics are expected to replace the human beings and then carry out the task that they do on a mundane basis. Right. So with recent advancement in technology, new generation of robotics are emerging. Right. So they perform very complex and delicate tasks. Right. They are also supported by cutting edge technologies and sensors. They recognize and analyze, act upon the information they receive. So again, these robots are loaded with sensors. They keep on receiving this data from the sensors, and then as per the data, they will be able to make some smart decisions, right? So that way they will be able to, collaborate with the human being. So there is a new term called collaborative robotics, right? We call it as cobots. What these collaborative robots do is, say they run along with the human being, so they just follow the human beings on a day basis. They try to check their behavior and try to learn from the behavior. Now in a manufacturing process, if a person is involved in taking care of a certain process, what these cobots will do is they try to imitate the person who is taking care of this process, so that in future all these people who are taking care of these operations will not be using or performing that operation, because the robots will take over them, right? So again, to give you one real example of these cobots, so there is a company called DHL, right? We all are aware of this particular company, right? So it is basically a courier and a logistic company, correct? So it is involved in transport of a huge amount of courier. So it is in fact one of the internationally recognized industry, where it keeps moving the the goods from one country to another. So they have recently started using this concept of cobots in one of their centers in Netherlands, where they use these autonomous mobile robots, which are designed from a company called Fetch Robotics, right? Fetch Robotics is a company that is designing collaborative robots called as autonomous mobile robots, so called as AMRs, right? So these are the robots which are basically used to locate and track and move the inventory in the warehouse and logistic facilities. So DHL has employed such robots, and what these robots do is, in their warehouses, these robots move along with the human beings, the workers of the DHL. So they follow the process where whatever the employees of the DHL are doing in this particular warehouse, they try to mimic them. So maybe assume that if they have to carry out this package, and if it has to be kept in a certain rack, these cobots will follow them. So they imitate this process, and maybe the next time onwards, when they get to see this inventory, so when they get to see a particular packet, instead of these individuals carrying this package, these cobots will carry them, and they keep it at the designated locations, right? And also, since these robots read the human behavior on a routine basis, they also able to make a decision where they identify which is the shortest path and in which order these the packages have to be kept in which rack. So which is in fact much more efficient than what the human beings are able to do, right? So that way the robots are helping us to perform these routine activities, or maybe in a scenario where assume that if in a manufacturing, if a huge risk is involved for individuals, where maybe there is so much of cutting and all other things will happen. So, and also in a industry where a lot of gases leakage are happening, so where instead of human beings, these robots can take the work from the human beings, and they can reach out to a location where typically human beings have a difficult to reach, and they can always engage in the operation in a much more efficient way, so thereby freeing the people from doing these repetitive and routine jobs, and then engaging them in more creative jobs will be of prime importance to these cobots now, right? So as I told, so with Industry 4, the robotic technology is gaining a lot of importance, and that way many companies are running behind to make robots which will be able to, imitate the functionality of the human beings. Then comes something known as the additive manufacturing or 3D printing, right? So I'm sure all of you have heard of the term 3D printing. This is one of the driving technology for the manufacturing industries, right? So gone are the days where now if I have to manufacture something, so you need to keep the spare parts also ready, right? So along with the entire equipment, you need to also come up with the various components that gets fitted into that particular system. Now with the advent of 3D printing, the entire scenario has changed. One thing is that the 3D printings are very very efficient. They take these digital 3D models and create a 3D part using a printer called 3D printer, right? So with respect to Industry 4, these 3D printers are emerging as one of the most valuable digital manufacturing technologies. So I was talking about specific point where in a system, if I want to keep these components ready, instead of having them ready always in the stock, what we can do is we can create the images of these files, or basically these components will be created as in a virtual file, so we call them as virtual inventories, right? A design file is stored, and this is fed into a 3D printing, and only on the need basis, as and when it is required, we can run this 3D printing, so that in no time we will be able to have the parts of a larger systems are kept ready, right? So what this will do is, see, this will basically avoid a lot of transportation. So maybe assume that if one factory is set up somewhere, so where the entire manufacturing is happening, so if I have to take it to a certain place, you need to involve in too much of transportation, so where we end up shelling out of a huge money. So with this 3D printers, what has happened is all you need to do is you just need to share the virtual inventory file, so that this file can be used, and as and when the need arises, only then we can manufacture. And this particular thing is called as a distributed manufacturing. You don't need to create everything at once, only based upon the need you can involve in the distributed manufacturing, right? So there you can have this 3D printing anywhere in the world. You just need to send this virtual inventory file, so based upon that the models are kept ready. So one of the prime importance of 3D printing is these days in healthcare, this is being widely used. We always get to hear about the terms called, say, artificial hearts, and then artificial lungs, artificial livers, artificial kidneys. So with this printing technology, we are able to basically create so many devices, so that would really help us in day-to-day activities. So with the a whole emphasis for Industry 4 on the manufacturing process, so 3D printing is acting as one of the key drivers for that particular Industry 4, right? And also, since this 3D printing offers a decentralized approach to manufacturing, so that would simply reduce a lot of transportation distances, and as well as the cost are saved in a good deal. So, and one of the example where 3D printing is basically used is, or a particular company that is involving in a lot of 3D printing process is a company called Fast Radius, right? So there are many companies that are getting involved in the 3D printing, but Fast Radius is one company which has been identified as one of the 9 top smart factories in the world, right? So Fast Radius will typically manufacture everything. So the only thing that we need to have is we need to avail their service. You just need to share these virtual files, and then anything that is required will be printed, right? So they supply these components throughout the world, and they are as of now one of the pioneers of 3D printings, where they typically manufacture everything, right, with the help of the 3D printers now, right? So also they have these the customized solutions which are very very proprietary models. In that case, as of now, there is no much details out of fast radius as far as the 3D technology is concerned. In that case, they have kept the secret to themselves, and but they are able to deliver on the manufacturing front to most of the companies around the world, right? So any questions? I'm sorry, I'm just getting on with the presentation without giving you an opportunity to discuss anything as such. So any questions? Anyone as such? No questions as of now.
So now somebody has put one question.
Yes, ma'am.
What in chat, it's there in chat. What
Okay.
materials are amenable for 3D printing?
What materials are amenable for 3D printing? Unfortunately, sir or madam, whoever has asked this question, so I'm not, very, very fond of or not knowledgeable enough to answer this question. Unfortunately, I don't understand the material that get into the 3D printing, right? So it's more of the technological part I'm looking into. So maybe I think I need to do a lot of groundwork in order to understand what kind of the materials gets into the 3D printing. So, and maybe if anyone from a mechanical background who have seen, the various kind of materials would be able to add on a lot of value to this. Anyone, sir? So even I would like to understand what are the, materials that gets into 3D printing as such. Any professors from any colleges who'd like to answer this? Okay, so Bharti madam, the person who has asked this question. So I think maybe possibly I can reach out to them after the session. Then I will ensure that they will get to understand, the kind of materials that we can use for the 3D printing. I can always work, and then I can always get back to that.
That is Shiva Kishan.
Oh, okay, Shivakeshan sir, I will get on to that. Right, I will just do a little analysis and I will update the details, sir. I hope Shivakeshan sir is hearing me out.
Yes, yes.
Okay, yeah. Any other questions?
How we solve the problem of single point of failure in
Mhm.
case of cloud computing? If we have more number of data center, then what about the environment?
Can you read that question again, madam?
Yes, sir. How we solve the problem of single point of failure in
Mhm.
case of cloud computing? If we had more number of data centers, then what about the environment?
Correct. See, again, when we get into the cloud computing, I don't think that we focus on single centers, right? So at any point of time, so the data has to be intact, right? So we will never have one source of data. So it is always going to be multiple sources, right? So that is where the companies of the Google, IBM will get into picture. So they have all these securities maintained, and they always keep multiple copies of the data, and that is how the data will always be secured. So that is the advantage of buying these cloud services. Maybe if I keep the data in my system, right? If I set up a center where I keep the data in one point, and if something goes wrong, so I will end up losing the whole data, right? And that is where you need to basically depend upon these cloud servicing companies where the data will always be preserved in multiple devices instead of having it in one single point. Even in case of failure, you will be able to recover it from other sources, right? And as far as the environment is concerned, definitely, so as the more number of the sources or the clouds increase, the environment will always be huge. And the prime factor of the cloud storage opting from service provider is that, so you don't want to invest too much of as far as the setting of the whole infrastructure is concerned. And that is precisely the reason we will use the cloud as a service from various vendors, right? So that would typically save a lot of amount for us as in one industry. So, may know the question that is asked by madam. So I'm not looking into this chat window. Okay, just
Professor Devan A. Gold, sir. Professor Devan A. Gold. He told thank you, sir.
yeah, Devin, is that sir fine? I'm sorry, I didn't see the chat window here, right? So I have just kept my presentation on. So I have come able to answer your question, sir. Devin, sir, is that fine, sir?
Yes, yes, absolutely fine,
Okay,
sir.
yeah,
One more thing I want to ask,
yeah, yes, sir.
generally, if you take example of any of the social media, so
Mm,
most of the time people sharing same kind of content in multiple accounts. So
correct.
how company will manage such type of you can say reputation of data? Because if suppose we will store all this data in one place, then if you save all this data in different place, it will take lots of storage, right? And
Correct.
so I don't know how this mechanism works. In if you can throw some lights on this, then it will be beneficial for us.
Sir, it is basically now, if you look at the simple example of Google Drive, correct? So, see, you have a Google Drive, I have a Google Drive, but everybody is given with a limited space. So, whatever we want to do, we have to work within that limited space. So, whether you store the information that is your personal information, or whether you are getting these things forwarded from some other resources, right? So, if you are keeping it in your storage, so it will always be, counted as a part of your storage, and accordingly, the memory will increase. Once you hit a predefined limit, in that case, either you have to delete all your information, or you need to go for the higher memory. So again, if you look at Google, so they give you a 15 GB of free data, correct? So once you exceed that, you start getting the notification from the Google saying that your memory is almost full. Either you free the memory, or you can go for the paid services, right? So that way it will always happen. So every account come with a predefined storage, right? So after some point, you definitely have to, remove that. So otherwise, you will end up, using that space to a maximum. But typically, these days, the memory that is to the storage that is given to every individual is so huge that, so it would literally take a lot of time to fill in. And periodically, we have to, delete these unwanted messages so that you can continue to use the restricted storage space that is available to us.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions?
No, sir. You can continue.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Okay, right. So what we had is we are just done with this 3D printing process, right? So now up in the technology is something called as a digital twin, right? So we have discussed one of the design principle of industry 4, that is creating a virtualization. So that is nothing but basically creating a digital twin here. So now what we mean by a digital twin here, right? So if you notice this little diagram that is there on the right side, right? So on one side I have this actual machine, and the other side you can see that it appears as if some a virtual image is created there. So that is basically what the digital twin is, right? So we create, or we basically mimic the functionality of the physical component there into a virtual component, and we will try to basically insert various sensors in the real machine, so that we read the information when it is live, when it is running, so that we gather this information, and then we decode this. We use all our intelligent algorithm to identify what could possibly the errors that that particular machine can run into, or basically it can identify so its efficiency under varying conditions, right? So all those information can be captured, and accordingly decision is made to build a new machine incorporating all these inputs. And before we actually come up with the next machine, we will see how the simulation of this particular machine goes, which is based upon the information from the actual running machine. And based upon that input, we always try to design a better system so that we avoid all these possible errors that will happen in the running machine in futures, right? So digital twin is, as I told, it is basically creating a replica of the physical components, right? So again, the digital twinning is one of the key component of industry fair, where a lot of IoT and then AI analytics are used in order to create the simulation version of the actual machine. As an IoT device sends data almost in real time, a digital twin is able to collect this data continuously, maintain its fidelity with the original machine throughout the lifespan of the product system. And this particular information collected through various channels and through the digital AI and analytic algorithm, so we will be able to create a better system, so that would potentially address all the issues that come sometime in the future as far as the machines are concerned, right? So for example, an operator can use a digital twin to identify why a part is malfunctioning, or to predict the lifetime of a product is, right? So since we continuously take the data in real time, we will always monitor the health of these machines, and we will be able to understand when the possibly the machine is going to encounter some kind of concerns, and when we need to intervene, and then we need to address those things, right? So this continuous simulation always help to improve the design product, as well as to bring in the efficiency in the working of the machines, and also ensure the equipment uptime, so their running time, right? So there is the one company called the Penske. So it is basically an American pro racing company. They participate in a lot of these vehicle races, right? So we have heard of this Formula One racing and all. So where so the companies try to show that their vehicle is much more better than any other automaker's car is, right? So that way, so a company called Penske is tied up with Siemens, and they are trying to analyze the working of these engines during the runtime. So when actually it is being put on a platform for the racing, so they have incorporated so many sensors inside the engine, so they try to collect the real-time data whenever the race is happening, and they will interpret data using this analytics and try to optimize these engines such that when they come up with their next version of the vehicles, all these things will be addressed, so that they improve the speed of the cars, right? If you notice this smaller diagram below, so we have one engine, and basically a simulation version or a virtual prototype of the same is done. You can see that these are these yellow and red lines which indicate the possible locations of the concerns, where so with this real-time data sensing, they will be able to identify the problem, and then possibly look for a solution. When the next version of the cars, they will be able to have these engines which are free of these kind of concerns, right? So the whole team of Penske is working with Siemens to gain access to advanced digital and simulation solution, including the digital twin, right? So as these particular things will help them to create a innovative test bed, as well as create new parts, so that will offer a lot of optimization in terms of the performance is concerned. So that way they can always address the physical concerns that actually happens in machine much early in their design cycle. So in that case, a rare car, a race car digital twin is based on sensors fitted into real car. These sensors collect a lot of data, so such as tire pressure, engine control, and wind speed, which is then converted into a virtual car model, right? So the exact replica of the car is done, and then these improvised details are fed into that. So it's this model that allows engineers to test the different design configuration, making it effective data-driven design changes at a very, very rapid pace, right? So these days, since the competition is very tough, so that way you need to release your, next version of the car as compared to any other competitors, right? So the it's not only giving them a analysis of improving their machineries. This is also adding a lot of benefits as far as their investment is concerned. Since you virtually consider all these design concerns, you address them in the simulation, then try to before you actually create the working model, you put it through a simulation. That way, so the final product that you get is always free of these concerns. So that way, instead of creating a model first, then testing it, then identifying the bugs, these are always done much before the actual or the physical model is created. So this would always help them to save a lot of amounts in that. All right. So then one more technology that is gaining popularity these days is called augmented reality, right? Augmented reality, and there is one more term called as virtual reality. Augmented reality and virtual reality, there is a slight difference between both the sectors, augmented and virtual reality, right? So if I have to tell you one simple example of augmented reality, so I'm sure many of you have tried this new application from Google. It's called Google Lens, right? So what you can do with the Google Lens is maybe assume that if people like me who are very fond of plants and their information, what you can do is, in case if you don't know a particular plant's name or any details as such, what you can do is you can just open up your Google Lens, and you can capture the image of that particular plant, and immediately it will generate so much of data. You will able to get to know what's it the common name is, what's the technical name is, to which variety of plants it belongs to, and all. Every single data will be put across in your fingertips, and that is what the augmented reality is. Maybe you can see in the picture a small child is trying to focus the tab into the atlas that we get, right? So it is trying to read a particular information from the globe, right? So then you can see that in her tab the information is a little different than what she is seeing on the the globe there. So what it is giving is, it is giving her an augmented, that is basically enhanced version of the location or the information they're looking at. In addition to that particular location, it ends up giving you too much of information which you can always use it for your knowledge. So as far as the industry 4 is concerned, these augmented realities will really help to revolutionize the industries. Maybe if I can give you one more use case, right? So we all know that the medical surgeries are such an expensive as well as the complex aspect. So any surgeon who is a popular surgeon who is looking after his patients, so we assume that in case of the cancer patients, so it is very, very critical that we identify the cells which are damaged, right? So typically, more often than not, whenever the surgery is happening, so the doctors have a tendency of looking into the reports. They will try to read out the information from MRI scans or the CT scan, identifying the actual location of the these damaged cells, and then accordingly they have to do the incision into the body of the patient. So in that case, it is referring to some document, and then working with the patient may not be very, very efficient method. So that is where this augmented reality will help you out. So what augmented reality do is, they offer this information on smartphone, tablets, and there is something called as the smart glass. So the surgeons can just wear the smart glass, and then they can read the entire information that is there in the MRI scan, or for that matter the CT scan. And to an extent that, in fact, the images can be superimposed, the human body, and then the images that are generated can be superimposed, and with that superimposition the surgeons will be able to judge precisely the point of damaged cell, and accordingly they can make an incision into that particular cell, and then they can get this treated. That is what the power of augmented reality is, right? So basically, soon augmented reality will be everywhere with online presence everywhere. So now students have stopped going to schools and colleges. So the augmented reality is going to give them too much of information. In that case, I wonder, even if the schools and colleges starts, the people will show any interest in coming to colleges. Of course, nothing can replace the offline mode, nothing can replace the teachers, because teachers and the faculties are something else, right? So maybe they can get the information, but the kind of the discipline and then the kind of behavioral and the attitude concern that the teachers can teach, nobody else can do it. So no virtual platform can help them to get that knowledge, right? So this way, augmented reality is one technology that will always support the industry for growth, right? In the context of manufacturing, AR could enable workers to speed up the assembly process and improve decision making. So recently General Electric has employed this smart glasses in one of their manufacturing units, where it has been seen that the employee who is looking after a particular plant is not working. So to make it work, he has to refer to too much of data. He has to go through all the servicing manuals and all. So now that is one process, and they have tried this fixing of a particular concern with the help of a smart glasses. Once a smart glass is worn, and then if you project this particular glass to a certain equipment where it is damaged, it starts giving you entire detail about that particular damaged equipment, and it will also give you the voice commands so that you can fix it on spot without referring to any other details as such. And this would typically save them a lot of time in getting this a plant set it up. So you understand, so typically when a plant go off, so when the production stops, so the companies will always make a huge losses, right? So that way, with the augmented reality, since the time required to fix these things or time required to address these concerns are very very small as compared to the actual time that is required to address these things with the help of the physical documents. So augmented reality can help the industry for to have a much more efficient systems in place, right? So now, if you notice, what we have done is we have gone through all possible technologies that fit into the industry for, right? Right from IoTs to all the augmented technologies. But if you look at the IoTs, if you look at the robotics, if you look at the 3D printing, and if you look at the augmented reality, so the concept is one thing, but when you look at their implementation, right, so it will always throw you a lot of challenges. So the prime challenge that we always face is what would be the hardware support that is required for all these technologies. So the reason why I have kept this embedded part after all these technologies, so first we need to understand where every technology is heading, and then as per that requirement we can always focus on the kind of the hardware requirement we come up with, right? So be it the IoTs, be it the augmented realities, be it the robotics, right? So every single system has to have this right embedded components, right? So with the improvement in technical technologies, and also with emphasis on the connectivity and then the automation processes, so embedded systems are always driven by these challenges, right? Because coming up with the suitable hardware for all these setups is really really a complex task, right? So it's not only that. So every setup will challenge the requirement of hardware components, be it in terms of the processor or the controller selection, be it the choosing of the protocols that are involved, right? With every change in technologies, the embedded system will always be thrown some challenges, and these challenges is basically drive this embedded systems to have the exciting times as far as the industry 4 is concerned, right? So typical challenges that we encounter when we look at the industry 4 with respect to various technologies is, right? So what kind of processor or basically controller we need to choose, and there is always a challenge because so much of connectivity is involved among the components and among the machineries and all. So there could be a wired connection, there could be a wireless connection. All these things will basically pose a various challenges like choosing the right communication protocols. It's not only that, even the operating system that gets into the systems is right carefully chosen across. And at the same time, since we share a lot of data to all these storage devices, so managing this data is equally important, right? So then among all these things, the prime factor that is taken into is, so what kind of protocols that I use? Because we say that industrial IoT. So IoTs are something that keep on, sensing these data, then keep on sharing this information. So what kind of networking protocol we will use so that, these things can efficiently manage? Because as I told, in every single second, there is so much of data that is being generated. So working with this data is not that simple. And, working with this data in terms of software is a different challenge. And when it comes to hardware, it is going to be a lot of other challenges that creep in, right? So that way, these are the challenges that I have identified. And then let us see what we can possibly look into to address some of these things, right? So any questions so far in this discussion? Anyone? So any questions as such? Right. So a good afternoon. We are, having this session. We all had good food, and then I'm not sure how many of you are listening as such. No questions? Okay. Bharti madam, can you please look into the chat box if we have any messages as such? Okay, so I presume that there are no questions as such. In case if any questions are there, kindly please feel free to enable your microphone, and then you can put across that question to me, right?
I have a question, sir.
Sorry, madam. Any questions is there?
What is happening on open standards?
Sorry, madam, I didn't hear you. Can you come again?
What is happening on open standards?
What is happening on open standards? Madam, which standards? So because so since we have so many things which are open standards, so any specific standards as such?
Sir, this is the question from one of the participants, sir. N. Shivakishan.
Okay, Shivakishan sir, I didn't get the question as such. Right. So what we will do is, I think maybe since we are discussing this little thing related to embedded also, so I will cover some questions, maybe I will put some light into these discussions related to the protocols also. I think maybe once we go through that, possibly you might get an answer. Otherwise, we will take up this question again, sir. Any other questions, madam?
No, sir. No, sir.
Okay. Yeah, fine. Thank you. Right. So now, when it comes to the hardware requirements, or basically looking at from the embedded's perspective, right? So we basically need to identify a high performance, computing system, so that will increase the speed at least by 10 times what we are currently seeing. Because so when we are looking at industry 4, since these systems are going to be complex, so since they communicate the data at a much faster rate, the amount of data that is generated is very, very high. In that case, so it poses a good challenge that you need to have a system that is at least 10 times faster than what we are currently working with, right? So, and one necessary requirement is that every system should be able to support this real-time information processing, right? So that is what the prime importance in industry 4 is. And also, so because see, there are so many devices which are connected, and definitely the power consumption is always going to be a challenge, right? So in that case, we need to build a system that is always going to be power efficient, right? So this will always pose a new kind of challenges, because with so many sensors working, so many protocols running all the time, and so many systems running at the same time, the power consumption is always going to be a good sign. In addition to that, so of course there has to be design simplicity, and then we should be able to reuse these setups. And of course, the cost is one factor that need to be looked into. Again, there is always going to be a trade-off, whether we go for the cost optimization or we go for the design simplicity as such, right? So it will always pose the good challenges, right? So considering all these parameters that are listed, Texas Instrument is making. It's not only Texas Instruments. In fact, all these companies like Infineon, NXP, and then STM Micro, so they're working on various controllers that would cater to the requirement of Industry 4. So I have chosen one example from Texas. So it is developing this Sitara set of microcontrollers, which will basically have all these mentioned parameters that now we have discussed. In addition to that, so these controllers will have a significant amount of circuitry in the processor, and then they involve large capacity for memories, and then the networking protocols, so the IO accelerator, and in addition to everything, they should be able to offer a secure environment also, right? So these processors will come with multiple cores of processors, where all these cores basically look after a separate activity, so that the speed of the processing can always improve. A particular core will always look at a critical design part, so that the data is captured in real time, and then these hardware should be able to respond to that real time data. And in addition to that, every you know hardware or a processor that comes in, it should be able to support all the industrial network standard connections. I think maybe as one of the faculties has asked me, so what about the standard connections? In that case, I think irrespective of what is the development in controllers, it should be able to support all the standard protocols that are available, right? So this particular controller from Texas, Itara set of microcontroller comes with a lot of input ports, so that you can have a lot of interfacing done to that. And one essential thing about all these things is the factors of safety and security is also of prime concerns. It covers all the major encryption and description and all authentication protocols, right? So the chip that is employed in Sitara set of microcontrollers, so has a power management system with over voltage and under voltage sensing requirements, right? In that case, it will also offer all power related functions, right, which would basically help you to maintain these equipments in a better way as compared to the existing controllers what we have. And it is always going to be a challenge. Even I'm sure that with the Sitara set of microcontrollers, we will not be able to satisfy the requirement of Industry 4, and this process has to continuously evolve. And going forward, these things will always put every the hardware designing company or controller designing company into a phase where they will be challenged every single day with the new set of program problem statements, right? So it's not only that, even the database management that we employ for IoT and cloud had to have a balanced hardware. So they need to provide. So as somebody was asking, what happens in if there is a single line failure, right? So we should be able to have a right kind of a structure where these things are always looked after. It is very, very essential that we build a right database and with the right set of embedded devices put in place, and we will be able to protect it against any malfunctionalities and all, right? So that way, even choosing the right set of database management is always going to be a challenge, right? And then again, coming back to this communication protocol, since as I told, so every system is basically connected to the IoTs, so that would always pose a lot of challenge as far as the communication protocols are concerned, right? So if I have to show some light into these things, so there are so many communication protocols available. We need to always pick the right one. So because every single protocol will offer some advantages, some disadvantages. They have a limitation when it comes to their data rate. They have a limitation when it comes to their range, and then they have a limitation when it comes to their power consumptions now, right? So I have listed out a few the standard protocols available: Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, Zigbee, Z-Wave, RFID. Then there is licensed LP WAN available, and then unlicensed LP WAN, LoRa, right? Sigfox. So so now these days, LoRa and Sigfox are gaining a lot of momentum as far as the long distance, communications are concerned. Of course, the cellular technology is always there: 3G, 4G, and 5Gs. With 5G, coming into picture, so many things are going to change as far as the connectivity technologies are concerned, right? So see, the popular wireless technologies that we can discuss here is, so these things. So what we have is, so there is something called as Bluetooth, Zigbee, 6LoWPAN, RFID, and Wi-Fi. So we call them as, so the WPAN and then LAN communications. So they are better suited for, so the short distance communication. So Zigbee, Bluetooth, typically for home and indoor application, they offer better, services compared to the longer range. So in fact, for all other long distances, we have various other technologies, right? So there is something called wireless wide area network technology, is called known as WWAN, for long range communication, such as smart meters, animal and asset tracking. So since industry force require you to communicate the data at a very high speed to different locations or different length of the geographies. In that case, it is a huge challenge that what sort of the wireless technologies we employ in, whether it's going to be cellular or it's going to be low power wide area networks called LP WANs. Even the LP WANs are categorized as licensed and unlicensed long range technologies, which falls as LoRa and Sigfox, right? So there is always going to be this challenge. Now, how do we basically overcome this challenge? Is again, we need to make a lot of analysis here. So remember, the choice of network, the wireless technology will also influence the power consumption. So because when I look at all these technologies, of course, range is one concern, and then their power consumption is always the other concern now. If you notice in this particular setup, so this is a group of sensor, and this is also a group of sensor. This is also a group of sensor, and this is one group of sensor. Here, group of sensors are communicating among themselves now. So these are called as sensor nodes, right? So these are called as sensor nodes. They keep on exchanging the data between these two nodes, right? So as far as the power consumption is concerned, there is always a huge challenge. How many sensors you have set up, and to what distance they are able to send these information, and how long they are active, right? So all these things will get into picture when we basically understand the power consumption. Remember that it's not only the battery manufacturer that will be giving the exact figure of what would be the power consumption is. So it's not only depends upon the manufacturer, it equally depends upon the kind of technology that we are working with, right? So every technology offers a different level of communication range and the different level of power consumptions, right? So all these things will lead to a comparison of various protocols. Right here I try to get the picture of various communication technologies that are available to us. We can work with them and then try which one suits better to our requirements. Again, there is a huge challenge, so it depends upon what sort of system you are working with, right? Whether there is a requirement for a short distance communication, long distance communication, at what rate you want to send the data, and what is your power backup is, right? So in this case, right, there are various technologies that are listed out, right? So Zigbee basically, has a nominal range. It runs only from say 10 to 100 meters. The data transmitter rate is pretty low, and then the even the power consumption is medium. So then we have the most popular technology, that is Wi-Fi. These days, everybody, so are working with Wi-Fi. So the range is a little higher as compared to the Zigbee. At the same time, even it offers a better working rate, the data rate, but the again the power consumption of WiPo is better as compared to the Zigbee. It consumes a low to medium as such. So then there is this low pan technologies, right? So it consumes the lower power, but the problem with that is the range and then the transmit rate are very, very low now, right? So these days, even in fact, LoRa is gaining a lot of momentum because of the kind of range it offers. So 2 to 15 kilometers. And then again, one concern with the LoRa is always it's a database. And then even the power consumption is manageable, but range is one thing that works in favor of LoRa. But when it comes to the data speed, it is always a concern now, right? So these days, I think maybe recently there is one more Wi-Fi 6 version. So that is, basically targeted to address these industry 4 concerns, right? So I think that is one good study we can engage in. So I have not gone through it. So it may be in case if you are interested to look into that particular model or version of Wi-Fi, you can just engage in and check what kind of advantages that it offers, right? Right. So with now everything moving towards 5G process and all, so again, this will lead to a huge challenge as far as this communications are concerned, right? So I think maybe sometime back a faculty has asked me a question. So sir, did I go through any of these slides where your question is answered? So there was a question related to standard protocols. Okay, I'm not sure if that is still valid as such. Okay, that should be fine. So in case if there is any question, you can always put it across so madam can read it me out. Yeah, yeah, sir. N. Sivan, sir is online. Shivan, sir? Okay, right. So, and then,
Can I ask the question?
yeah, yes, sir, please.
The problem is if I switch off my camera, my microphone is also getting off.
Okay,
okay. Okay, my question is this. Today, except Apple, all other brands use the same charging port, whether it is the latest USB Type-C or before that it was a micro USB.
Correct.
That has become possible because the standard essential patents for the technology were made available for all the manufacturers.
Correct.
So for Industry 4 to take place, I was wondering what is happening towards making the latest technology available for adoption in various sectors that will lead to big transition of Industry 4. So I wanted to know what is happening in this particular domain.
Okay.
I come from a buildings background, so I'm aware of something called a KNX standard. So KNX was offered so that different companies working in building automation can manufacture devices that can talk to each other so that building automation becomes a reality. So I'm coming from that background. Thank you.
Okay. Sir, as far as there's the type of connectivities that we have, whether it is type C or type B. So see, these things will take a lot of time to share the information between the various companies. See, the industry 4 focuses on sharing the knowledge and sharing the technologies among the your competitors. So I'm not sure how far that is going to happen because so as far as the industry is concerned, see, due to the open source, right? So many individuals are started contributing to all these open source platform, and because of that, there is a significant change in the way the IT industry functions. But unfortunately, I'm not sure whether these things can be extended to other industries concerned as such, because as I told, there is something called as a fast radius company, so which is basically into 3D printing, and they don't want to share their details with anybody. They are just keeping it as confidential. So when such a things happens, then it is very, very difficult for all other companies to have a this compatibility happening with the devices that are created by various industries. So once this particular roadblock is cleared, right? If maybe suppose if I say the Apple uses a different kind of connector, and then all other the maybe any, if I can pick up the name of Samsung, so they typically make use of different kind of ports for their cell phone charging, right? So there is always this competitive edge or the competitive superiority they feel that they don't want to share it with anyone. So when that happens, it is very, very difficult to, so make the devices compatible with any other devices. Then we need to typically go with the same set of ports, and then we need to have the only kind of particular handset now. So unless and until this information sharing happens, unless and until this openness comes into all industries, so there is always going to be some concerns related to as far as industry 4 is concerned. So this is going to continue for some time, right? So maybe there comes a time where people might say that, okay, since it might have worked in IT sector, let me try sharing the information that is confidential with a particular company. So then possibly things might work out in a better way, right? So till then, sir, this compatibility problem is going to exist. Is that fine, sir? Shivan, sir?
Yes, it's fine. In fact, first radius is the one that has prompted me to ask this question.
Sorry, sir, I didn't get you. Come again.
You gave the example of first radius. That is the one which prompted me to ask this question.
Okay. So they are not ready to share their technology with any other individuals. They have kept it as confidential, and they are also, being one of the topmost industries in 3D printing. They don't want to lose out on the competition. They just want to be there on, top of the list. So once the information sharing happens, so there are many now these days, everybody is encouraging the startups, especially in countries like India, where the startup is on a roll. So every day, thousands of companies are getting registered. So people will pick up these technologies and they start working on that. Right. So that way, maybe, they don't want to share it as of now. I think hopefully with, so much of emphasis being given to industry 4. So where one point of a discussion with respect to industry 4 is the open communication between various industries, right? It not between the industries, the open communication between various industries. If this happens, when possibly if I name two automakers, if Hyundai starts sharing its platform with the Tatas, then right, so that competition may not be there. So but it might lead to a better prospect in terms of growth of Tata as well as the Hyundais, right? So that is always going to be a bottleneck as far as, this sharing of information between the rivals are concerned, right? So I think that would take some time, and then possibly in future something like open source would be extended to all the other industries, and possibly we will have a much better way of dealing with the technology than what we have now. Yeah, thank you, sir. It was nice having a discussion with you, right? So any other questions as such before I move on? Okay, so you can always post in the messages. So meanwhile, I will just continue with the little discussion on the smart sensors, right? So again, one key area of concern is, having the right sensors for all these applications, because again, so much of, Internet of Things is plugged into this industry 4. So it equally puts emphasis on designing and coming up with new sensors. We typically call them as smart sensors, right? So these days, the market is flooded with so many sensors, right? And in addition to that, the sensor has to be something called as smart. So now the smart term is being associated with everything that we see in real world now. So now how a smart sensor is different from a regular sensor, right? So a smart sensor is basically, much more than what a basic sensor is. It has got a circuitry on its encasing, where it has to have a lot of, data processing circuits. When we say that the IoT is able to share the data then through its sensors, so typically the smart sensors have to have a lot of hardware which will be able to make some decision based upon the kind of data they are sensing. So that will really help you to, instead of sharing the data, it will really help the process to take a kind of corrective approach on its own without even somebody's intervention. So that way, so there is a huge challenge that pops up up when the smart sensors get into picture, right? So smart sensor take the information and use all the computing resources that are built into that sensor to perform predefined and programmed function on the specified type of data it is collecting, right? It then passes the data on via a network connection. So smart sensor provide again valuable information in a wide range of industrial and commercial settings. So this basically to improve the productivity, then advertising, sales, marketing, and basically to reduce the cost and increase the overall efficiency of the systems now, right? So these smart sensors, I'm sure with the kind of emphasis that is being given to Industry 4, they will always be a important part of the Industry 4 setup. So there are various kinds of sensors available. So typically we have seen these sensors at various levels. These sensors can basically used in various applications like the level sensors, electric current sensors, humidity, pressure, temperature. There is a heat sensor, flow sensors, fluid velocity sensor, and IR sensors. So these are the few common sensors which are widely used in most of the industrial applications. So if I have to give you five typically the smart sensor that can find a wide usage in Industry 4 is, right? So the level sensors which basically are used to check the measure the level of the containers, bins, tanks, or feeding real-time information to inventory management. So these level sensors will be of very good use. So in fact these are also used in a lot of waste management and irrigation to diesel fuel gauging and more. And then one of the most popular sensor is a temperature sensor. These are widely used in industries, right? Maybe typically in all manufacturing sectors, the temperature sensor is used. Maybe if I have to take of a boiler industry where a predetermined temperature has to be maintained. So the typical sensors keep on monitoring this temperature for a large duration of time, and whenever there is a change in the temperature, that might possibly send information to the supervisor so that a corrective action can be taken. Or now, so with the Industry 4, even that has to be automatically taken care by the machinery itself, even without being the information being sent to a supervisor and then involved in a corrective action, right? It is connected to all the IoTs and cloud computing platform so that it can detect when the machine or equipment is overheating and then needs some maintenance or a shutdown is need to be done. So this kind of information can always be gathered with temperature sensors, right? So then there are pressure sensor which are these days are widely popular as far as the automotive industry is concerned. So various pressure levels are checked, be it the engine pressure, be it the tire pressure. So at various level these pressure sensors can always be used, right? And then one of the most widely used sensor in embedded system is the infrared sensors, right? So typically you can use these infrared sensors right from small application to a very complex applications. And these days infrared sensors are quite popular as far as these smart wearables are concerned. So these days now you have this smart watches which basically contain these sensors. When you wear them, they will start giving you all the health related and fitness related details on your screen, right? So these basically are also used in many medical equipments where so they will help you to understand the blood flow during the surgery, and then along with that it can also be used in engineering and construction to monitor the heat leaks in buildings and industrial facilities. And there is one more sensor which is quite popular in all electronic gadgets, that is the proximity sensors. It is a sensor that detects the presence of nearby objects without any physical contact. And if you notice, this is a sensor that is there in every cell phone. So the moment you receive a call, so the moment you start talking over the phone, you can notice that the display of the phone goes off, right? Once you receive a call and then if you start speaking for some time, you can notice that the display will basically go off. So this is due to there is a proximity sensor which will identify the distance of a phone from your ear. And why this display goes off is basically to disable your keypad. It shouldn't happen that, since now these days every cell phone comes with a touch screen. The moment you hold your phone closer to ear, so if your ear touches some some number or to some other contacts, you might just have some kind of inconvenience there. And because of that, these proximity sensors will identify this, and then immediately the cell phone goes off, right? So the keys will be disabled, right? So these proximity sensors these days are used in many, retail outlets to track the customers. Yes. Any questions, ma'am? I think I can hear some background noise here. Okay, I think maybe this is
Somebody has unmuted. I'll just check.
yeah. Fine, madam, no problem. Sure. Okay, right. So again, these proximity sensors are used to a greater extent in all the self-driving cars, and then air.
Sir, yours is muted, sir. Vijay Manthi, sir.
I didn't notice that. Okay, yeah, thank you. Right, so I was basically discussing the proximity sensors. So these are sensors that are quite, widely used in self-driving cars as well as in anti-aircraft systems, right? So with this now smart sensors, so if I have to connect one particular segment to Industry 4, that is going to be the automotive industry, right? So I see a lot of, challenges and a lot of scope as far as this particular industry is concerned. So there is a very stiff competition happening with respect to all the automotive companies. The reason is very simple, because now everybody wants to move towards this autonomous cars or driverless cars or electric vehicles, right? So that would really put a lot of emphasis as far as the Industry 4 is concerned, the way they manage this whole manufacturing of autonomous cars and all. So one simple example I have taken with respect to the automotive sector is, so if you can see this picture, this is a normal car these days that we see in the market now. So this particular car is fully loaded with so much of embedded system in this particular vehicle. So maybe if you can notice, so there are so many labels you can see with respect to a car. There is digital radio, there is audio system, there is GPS, there is voice recognition, DVD player, telematics, and then multimedia system, display system. There are so many things that are getting into this particular car now, right? So as of now, this is being done without even getting into what Industry 4 says is. But with the Industry 4, this is going to change in a huge way. So what will happen here is we end up getting autonomous car that would look like this. If you look into this, so this particular diagram has so many things getting connected to it, and this particular car is a driverless car. So when you think of a driverless car, so the detail that is required to run such a car on the roads is very huge, right? So one thing is that there is no driver, and this car has to continuously gather a lot of information, correct? So it need to identify at what speed it is going, whether it is seeing any obstacle in front of it, or whether there is a blind spot, there is whether it is running in the daytime or in the night time, all this information. And also it has to at every single instance of time, it has to gather too much of information. And now there is no guarantee that this particular autonomous car, when it enters the road, it will be devoid of any problems as well, right? So it is likely to have it, but the good thing is that there has to be a process to rectify these things, and that is where so these driverless cars will pose a lot of challenges to every single technology that is there in the Industry 4, because all these driverless cars or autonomous cars, so as I told, they will generate a huge amount of data, and this data has to be captured so that all these automakers will work on this data, so that so when they analyze this data, they would be able to make the right business decision in terms of the efficiency of all these self-less drivers are concerned. So maybe if I have to name a few car sensors that are typically used now, so there is I think maybe the people from automotive background would be able to help us that there are various sensors that are connected into this particular sectors. right? There is a mass airflow sensor, there is an engine speed sensor, so it continuously checks at what speed the engine is happening. And then there is a oxygen sensor, measures the amount of unburdened oxygen present to the exhaust pipe. And there is a spark knock sensor which will ensure that the fuel is burnt correctly. There is a fuel temperature sensor which ensure that the fuel is injected to keep the motion very smoothly. And there is a voltage sensor which manages the car speed and ensure the speed is controllable. See, all these sensors are basic sensors that are now fit into every single automotive vehicle. So in addition to that, these days there are so many sensors that is getting into that. I'm sure all of you have taken a note of some of the recently released cars into the sector. So maybe if I have to talk about this MG Hector, so MG Hector, you can basically connect it through your cell phone. You might have seen this ad where the owner of the car sits in his home and says that hello MG, turn on the engine or turn on the AC. So now this is happening. So this is able to happen only because of the kind of the controller support that we get as far as the autonomous automotive industry is concerned. So these are likely to increase manifold with the emphasis on industry 4. So everything possibly a car is doing, you can basically see it from your phone, and accordingly you can check what is the status of that, and it will keep on periodically keep on giving you the updates, right, when the servicing has to be done and when how all the proper decision making has to happen, right? So this is likely to take some time, but definitely at some point this would get into picture, right? And this is something related to autonomous cars. And now I have got one very useful device that is called the NI water savior, right? So this is the device that is from a company called Nimble Vision, to which I'm some way in some capacity connected to this particular company. So what the Nimble Vision does is, Nimble Vision basically identify the real life common problems that are every normal citizen faces, and accordingly they will design their solutions. And one of the product of Nimble Vision is basically called as the water savior, right? So maybe, so as far as its current level is concerned, it may not be the directly fitted to industry 4, but as far as its potential is concerned, it is definitely going to be a part of the industry 4. In fact, it is even backed by government of India and the central government and various companies like Amazon, Qualcomm, right? So they are getting forward, and then they are trying to work out a solution so that it can be extended to society in general, right? So NI water savior is basically a water tank solution, where these days if you look at, you have this sump and then you have a overhead tank there. So whenever the overhead tank is filled, automatically the machine goes off, and then when the quantity of water in the overhead tanks comes down, it will switch off. But it is more of very mechanical related things, where it just gives me turning on and off of the equipment. But with the help of this NI water savior, right, a lot of detailing is done, and to provide the solution to every household or to apartment or to any industries, right? A lot of analytics are used, a lot of dashboards are used. What it basically does is, it looks like whatever conventional water motor is, right? So but the only thing is that it is a very smart water savior. So it will give you a real-time analysis of how much water is there in both the tanks, and what level of water consumption is done on hourly basis, on daily basis, or maybe it will give you a historical usage of the data. It will not only identify the water levels, it will send all these details to your cell phone, and it will also give you option of controlling your the switching off your smart water level from your cell phone. And it will also detect all these the parameters that comes with water, the quality of water, whether it is TDS, pH, ORP, or dissolved oxygen, that will also be seen on your cell phone. And one more important feature of this particular thing is, it will detect any water leakage that happens in the household, right? That is one very important feature. So it will basically keep a tab of the quantity of water that is pumped into overhead tank, and and then the water that is being consumed on a daily basis, right? So in addition to all these things, it will detect the water leakage, and this information is always sent to your cell phone, right? So some of the snapshot of the dashboard are look like this, like the live water tank. Any point of time you can just open this app and you can check what kind of water level is there in the tank, and then you can always check the daily consumption breakup and hourly consumption breakup. So this will give you a fair bit idea about what is your daily consumption is and what kind of leakage that is taking place, or what kind of unwanted usage is happening, and based upon it you can always control that particular point. And it will give you a lot of history also, so based upon what kind of water consumption that has taken place from past 6 months or 1 year. So maybe as compared to individual household, if we put it in industry, this will play a very, very vital role, because in case of industry, it is very, very important that you manage the water level in various processes to an accurate level. And you also need to identify if there is any leakage, because industry is a huge setup where at multiple locations you might see this leakage happening, right? So with this little solution, you can always address such a concern, right? And since the government is also showing a lot of support, so when it gets the backing of Industry 4, this might possibly the case where every smart city might possibly start employing this technique, where the water will come from the corporation, and then every process that is involved, the water consumption, the billing, and then the water quality, everything can be just seen on the dashboard, and even the payment maintenance bill can also be paid with the help of a simple device now, right? And it does come with both the versions, the website version as well as the app version. You can either see it in the website, or you can always see it in your the cell phone, right? So these are the small innovative things that might possibly get into Industry 4, where they see a wider applications. As I told, so a lot of companies are coming forward to support using the IoT techniques. So with that happens, I think maybe soon this product will be launched in a market where we see a huge demand for this taking place, and then every government starts supporting this, so that the water consumption as a overall with respect to a particular country can be looked into, right? So this is the second use case of the Industry 4. And then, right, so with all these challenges, with all those the interesting things that are going to come in future with respect to Industry 4, what we see in the future as far as this particular Industry 4 is concerned, right? So with the new digital technologies emerging, it's always an exciting time for the manufacturing industry to look into all these things, right? So the wave of new technology opens opportunities for companies to take steps toward greater flexibility, sustainability, and productivity, right? So Industry 4 is also facilitating new ways for humans and machines to work together, right? Gone are the days when only humans work together. Now these days you have to engage your machines in your discussions, right? Because they always talk to you, they always share the data with you, right? So that way empowering businesses to achieve greater insights and reduce the risk of error and make better decisions, right? This is all one thing, but as I was discussing with Kishan sir, so there is always, that drawback or the little concern that exists, whether the companies or the competitors or various manufacturers are willing to adopt this ecosystem. They are willing to help each other to grow in a better way. That is still a concern, right? So, but one thing that need to be seen is with the possible potential of Industry 4, if everything falls in place, then we will soon see a technological revolution happening in this entire world, right? So that way we might see all the cutting edge technologies getting into Industry 4, right? So with this, I'm done with my little understanding about the Industry 4. So I'm open for discussion. So I request the participants, in case if they have anything in specific to ask, so or share the knowledge, I will be more than happy to do it.
Thank you, Vijay Mantis sir, for a very informative session. So thank you very much. So any questions from the participant side?
Any messages in the chat box, madam?
No,
Yeah,
sir.
yeah, Shivan sir.
Sorry.
Shivan.
Presently, if I buy a smartphone, it's a complete package delivered by a single company. So if something goes wrong after I try the usual fixes like a restart, if it doesn't work, I know where to go. I go to the customer service of the particular brand. In a smart home where maybe I have a fridge by LG, I have a washing machine by Samsung, AC by Carrier, and you're getting the idea. Different manufacturers giving different smart devices. And I'm trying to control all of these using maybe an Amazon Alexa or a Google Dot or some Apple smart device. So if my commands don't get executed, it is not straightforward to understand where the error is, whether the error is with the transmission or the reception or whatever is happening. So in the industry, what are the thoughts about supporting these kind of issues in the future, where different gadgets are connecting to a single IoT network, but all of them are from different manufacturers? A user who is not smart, he is not smart, that is why he is buying all these smart gadgets. So how does he figure out which one has actually stopped working?
Okay. So, sir, as far as you know, so whether buying of the various brand appliances is concerned, so you can either connect them to Android phone, or you can, connect them to iOS, or maybe there are other Windows stores. So since all these, manufacturers have to sell their product, right? They cannot deny as of now saying that, okay, only if you have a particular brand, if you have an iPhone, I will sell you product. If you have an Android, I cannot sell you product. That is not going to happen. So as far as the app development is concerned, so this information is always shared with the app developers, be it the iOS, be it the Android development. So every equipment details will be shared. And now maybe if you notice any of the devices, they always say that it is possible to access that device with either Amazon Alexa or with Google. Right. So in fact, for that matter, the Siri of the iPhone. So as of now, so where managing this equipment is concerned, there is no problem as such, right? So because unless and until you get the support from all the operating system that are loaded in any cell phone, so the equipment the cannot be sold in the open market. So I don't see any problem as far as that particular usage of home industry is concerned. So as far as addressing this problem, where how do I know that whether the concern is with the cell phone or with the equipment, right? So there are always standard procedures to check whether the cell phone is communicating with the appliance, whether there is something wrong with the app or something wrong with the appliances. That will always be there, because whenever a product gets released into a market, they will always set these testing procedures. With the help of that testing procedure, you will always be able to identify whether this particular issue is creeping from the cell phone or from the devices as such. But now these days, you look at any appliances, they should go with all the possible operating system a particular device is supporting. Otherwise, it is very difficult for them to survive in the industry. I hope, Shivan sir, that is fine with you. Kishan sir, sorry.
I'm not entirely convinced. For example, when we do a bank transfer, if it does not reflect in the person who was supposed to receive the amount, I talk to my bank, they talk to their bank. So my bank says, no, we have paid it from their side. It is a problem at their end. And when he speaks to his bank, he says, we have not received anything. If you have received something, we would have told you. And ultimately, both the banks blame something on RBI. They have some clearance protocols and all that. So maybe there is an error there with RBI. So when I'm not worried about devices talking to each other, because I understand there are these SDKs, software development kits, launched by Apple, launched by Android. So those protocols are clear. But when something breaks down, for the user to at least figure out whether the issue is with his this talking device or with the receiving device or with the cable in between, that I think will be a hassle to figure out in future.
Yeah, that is always going to be a concern, sir, because everybody cannot be from the technical industries, right? When you launch a particular product, it is basically launched keeping in every individual in mind, right? So as far as so maybe I think you might have experienced some bad things related to this bank transaction where your bank is unable to settle that. So of course, when it typically any such things happen, it is always the protocol that need to be followed by a certain bank as far as the transaction settlement is concerned. So I understand. So these things will happen. Even it has happened, a few times with me also. So because your bank's balance says that the amount is debited, and then the particularly the other person says that it is not credited to your account. So there is, so any this lapse happens anywhere. As a user, you will never get to know it, right? You cannot control that also, because all these technical details are out of the bounds of any common person. Maybe so we discuss this because we belong to technical field, and we can offer that, okay, this is a problem, how do I know it? Because as an engineer, with respect to our respective field, we are used to it. So we want to identify the errors, and then we want to rectify that. That is what we typically do. But from a common people's perspective, this is always going to be a challenge. In fact, not only common people, even the engineers are going to struggle, because we don't involve in any of these things. We only use them as an end customer. We only try to use these applications. We only try to share this information. But what happens inside in terms of technical details, we will never be able to access that, unless and until if a particular person has worked on the, if maybe if I the transaction is going wrong with the HDFC transaction, so only the people who are involved in that particular transaction development will be able to answer where the problem is, right? So otherwise, for a common problem, it is very tough to identify where the problem is. So unfortunately, we have no choice but to live with the same problem as such. Right, sir? Kishan, sir.
Yes, fine. Thank you.
So any questions? Okay, Vijay Mantis, sir. Thank you very much for this wonderful session. So we thank from our Department of Electronics and Communication Engineering, from the college and from the management side. Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much, madam. I take the pleasure of being in this session. So it was wonderful session on Industry 4, where I
Yes.
get to share my knowledge. So I tried attending few of the session, but unfortunately I couldn't. So hopefully any recording or something, so it will always
Yes.
be a welcome thing, so I can always access those things, right? So again, I
Yes.
thank all the management of ACS, and then principal, and especially HOD and the various staff for feeling that I'm worthy enough to be part of this wonderful session, and inviting me to have a session on Industry 4, right? Thank you very much, ma'am. It is always a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you, Shivakishan, sir, also very interactive in all the sessions from the day one. So thank you very much, sir. You are very interactive with all the speakers. So I have sent the attendance and the feedback link for today's session. So just copy and paste the link in the browser, so you may get access. So tomorrow's session, we are starting at 9 o'clock. So that is from Dr. Rajesh Buktar, Professor, Innovative Teaching Learning Method using Augmented Reality Technology. So an Industry 4.0 initiative. The second session will be Digital Transformation Technologies related to Industry 4.0. So mainly on the cloud operations. So Mr. Santosh Chachadi, Manager Cloud Operations, SAP Labs India. And afternoon, we are continuing with the lab sessions of yesterday by Mr. Rajkumar. So I kindly request all the participants to join for all the sessions in time. Thank you very much. So today
Ma'am,
we
please
will.
look into this. It's not working. That link is not working.
Sir, you just copy and paste, sir. Just copy and paste in
I
the
just
browser,
tried,
sir.
but for no one it's working. Please look
I'll
into the
just check,
chat
sir.
box.
I'll just check. I'll
Yes,
just check, sir. Okay, okay. 1 second, sir. I'll just open that. Sorry. Now you can do, sir. Now you can. I have that responses.
yes, now it's working. Thank you.
Yes, yes. Thank you, sir. Thank you.